Good evening, 12s, and welcome to the Seahawks 360 podcast, where we look at the Seahawks from every angle every week. I'm Candace Higgins,
And I'm Tino Ganasius.
and we are back to discuss the first loss of the Mike MacDonald era. But before we get into that, we have a very important announcement that we want to make. Both Tino and I and the Seahawks 360 podcast is officially independent. So what that means is you will, if you are looking for us on Spotify, on Apple, like you used to hearing us, we will not be directly under the Sports Ethos Network. So we'll be in a new place in terms of where our content is put. In the meantime, you can still have consistent content by following us on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel at Seahawks 360 Podcast. We are also on Twitter, on X. If for those of you who call it X, I'm not one of them, but you can find us on X at Seahawks 360 Pod. So your same content. In fact, we'll be doubling up here. We'll give you some previews. We'll give you even more content. So be sure that you go over to X, follow us at Seahawks 360, and follow us on YouTube. We'll be posting videos. So quality content coming at you in the meantime, but just looking forward to a different source. Okay. With that, let's get started about this game. It was the first primetime game of the Mike MacDonald era, Monday Night Football against the Detroit Lions. Big game, and ultimately was probably, I think, one of the most entertaining games of the week. Ultimately, your Seattle Seahawks fall in defeat. They lose 42-29 to the Lions. It was an explosive game, to say the least. Offense, Jared Goff has a perfect game, literally 18 for 18. Defense cannot force a single incompletion. He has 292 yards. Smith, on the other hand, balls out with 395 yards. He has one touchdown, one interception. Jared Goff has two touchdowns. So it really was a battle of the quarterbacks in this particular game. But the running backs were took no back seat to this game as well. Kenneth Walker absolutely exploded, 12 carries for 80 yards. You had Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. Gibbs had 78 yards. Montgomery had 40 yards. It was truly a magnificent showcasing. The third straight game for DK Metcalf to get over 100 yards. Jamison Williams, led the Detroit Lions receiving yards with 80 yards. So it was just, I think 70 of that he got like literally on one play, a 70-yard touchdown for him. So Tino, man, I think there's a lot to discuss with this game. But what were your thoughts, your takeaways, and how do you feel coming out of this game?
I feel great about the team. There's not a whole lot to be critical of. I think that, obviously Jared Goff goes 18 for 18. That makes you a little nervous, but the reality is I think the lack of or the players that were out on defense, that's where it showed up, right? You couldn't really get real pressure on him. It exposed the secondary at times. You can't expect any secondary to cover forever. And the fact of the matter is you're missing big time pass rushers with all the injuries. So that my first impression is I think they showed out considering the number of injuries on the defense. Stone Forsythe, was phenomenal against Aiden Hutchinson, which I don't know that I expected. He was good.
He wasn't.
He was good.
We'll talk about it later. No, it's okay. We'll come back to it.
He was good. He was better than a turnstile, which is what we've labeled him over and over again.
We'll come back to it.
Okay. That was my initial impression is they played very well. They went up against a team that I believe is at minimum they're equal, a team that could represent the NFC in the Super Bowl at their place on Monday night, crazy crowd, fired up team. And they played well. They didn't get the dub, obviously. And there are some things I know specifically defensively that Mike MacDonald wants to work on. But realistically, when you look at the schedule, this is not a game that any, realist should expect to win for the Seahawks. If they did, that would have been wonderful. They would have been the talk of the town. But they played well. I think that there are portions of the team that I think are even better than I thought or expected. I think Geno Smith is still improving, even at his age. The athleticism of Kenneth Walker was on display. You know, everyone's talked about his 3 touchdowns. He looked phenomenal. DK Metcalf is showing out. AJ Barner looks like an actual player, which has been very cool. My Michigan guy, I love it. So, you know, I think, honestly, you didn't come out with any huge injuries. Hopefully, you've got some guys coming back, and the Seahawks are definitely a playoff team from what I can see. And, you know, there's talent there to go even further if the defense continues to gel. So I was impressed, right? I expected it to be a worse outcome than what it was, to be honest with you, given the injuries in the front 7. So excited about what's to come. Excited that they're playing the Giants next week, potentially without Malik Neighbors. Not for my fantasy team, but certainly as a Seahawks fan, I'm very, very excited about that. What about you?
Yeah, you bring up a good point with the injuries. I think it's important to just go over how big of a storyline that was leading up to this game. The Seahawks ultimately ended up being without, of course, the Chinonwosu, who was expected to come back but was not able to return in time. We were out Boye Mafe, out Leonard Williams, out Byron Murphy, and then you find out you're also out Jerome Baker. And Julian Love goes out in the middle pretty early on in this game as well. And so that just makes for a long day at the office. And I understand that the Lions also, Lions fan base has been talking about they don't give enough credit for them being injured. They were missing their center, Frank Ragnow. That is a big deal. They were also missing defensive back Brian Branch, who is a big chess piece for them. And they were missing some other guys as well, Marcus Davenport, I believe, and just a couple of other guys that are really important to them. But it's just a little bit different, not only where they were injured, but the amount of people that they were injured at, like the defensive line being basically having no starters, essentially. It was extremely problematic. I just think that's hard to overcome. And really, as soon as I saw the injury list, that pretty much made the case for, I pretty much expected a loss at that point, especially losing Jerome Baker. I think they would have had a chance healthy. In fact, I believe when I first did the initial schedule, I marked this down as a win because Geno does play so well in domes. It's been a theory I've been working on for a couple years now. You know, Tino, I've been saying it. It seems to be consistent. Every dome game, man, it seems to prove my point. Anyway, I think that I love the fight that this team showed throughout the game. They were still, the score I don't think was indicative of how competitive it was. There was a ton of back and forth. Lions come out and score, Seahawks score, and they came down really being behind 2 scores early on. The Lions decided that they wanted to strike first, and they did that and got immediately on the board. That was a smart decision by them. Ultimately ended up being, I think, a big difference in the game, that decision right there. Then you got DK, Geno, they go down the field. DK tries to fight for yards, ends up getting the ball fumbled, and on a drive that I thought was going really well and was more than likely going to end up to points. And so then you end up automatically in the hole 2 scores. And so there was this constant back and forth of, despite being down 2 scores, kept getting it to 1 possession game. And so you got to be impressed by that. I certainly am. I feel good about the way that the defense lost. And maybe it's just because it's new. I'll admit that I'd rather a team give up explosives than to be cut with death by 1,000 cuts. Because if this defense was, third down, you keep trotting down the field, you lose, and they gain time of possession. The offense is off on the field. The offense was your strong point that night. I think you needed Geno. You needed to lean in on that, and the team seemed to recognize that. But I kind of appreciate if they were going to let the Lions score anyway. I'd rather you go ahead and just get it over with and let the Seahawks offense get back on the field.
And there's nothing more demoralizing, in my opinion, than a team running it down your throat
Yes.
on a 10-minute drive or a 9-minute drive, and it's
Right.
16 plays and you can't stop them. And that also has an impact on your defense, down the road, in the fourth quarter, right? You're tired. So what I was trying to look up, and I don't remember off the top of my head, was when did Julian Love get hurt? And then what big plays came after Julian Love went out, right? And so,
Good question.
Jameson Williams had the big 70-yard touchdown pass.
Yeah.
And then there were a couple of other plays where, if, again, I don't know when he went out, but your free safety is ultimately responsible for, not allowing big plays. And I think that, if we're replacing him with Kobe Bryant or even Kayvon Wallace,
Yep.
it's not the same caliber player. There's a reason why he was a Pro Bowl player. There's a reason why they gave him an extension. And so that could potentially be a bigger loss, I think, than any of the individual front seven players. Not that he's more important necessarily, but I think that, the ability to not give up the big plays and to tackle well and to get the secondary in order, right? For everyone to understand their assignments. On the Jameson Williams pass, I know Williams is one of the most explosive players in the NFL, right? Watched him at Ohio State, watched him at Alabama. Dude can fly. He's in a different level of quickness as well, like suddenness. But there's still, somebody still should have tackled him. There still should have been somebody, in the back end to be able to tackle him. So I think that Julian Love injury is one I'm watching and one that makes me a little bit nervous because, for all intents and purposes, Wallace is really a strong safety. He's not a true free safety.
Right.
And then after him, you're putting Kobe Bryant back there potentially as a safety, which we all know, if you've been following the Seahawks for the last couple of years, I wish he wasn't on the team. I wish they would have kept DJ James or whoever instead of him, but we'll see. Again, this team it's impressive, right? I know that Brady Henderson, I think, brought it up, the idea that, is this an indictment of Pete Carroll that this team looks so good with new coaching, right? And with a lot of the same players. And I have to wonder, there has to be a little bit of truth to that, right? And because this team looks like a legitimate NFC West division winner, and at minimum, a playoff team that, if the defense can gel, will be very, very dangerous come playoff time.
Yeah, I think your point about Love is well noted because as much as it is important for those frontline players, Julian Love was extended. It's basically one of the first things that happened in the Mike MacDonald era, which means they identified him as a key piece to their entire defense. His ability to play in multiple spots. They touted his communication ability. I think that's key. You saw a ton of communication breakdowns. I think that's really what led to the explosives more than anything else. That and Kobe Bryant tends to be associated with coverage breakdowns in general whenever he's on the field. But I think that's something that is important to watch. And to your question, it's the closest thing I can find is that Love was ruled out early in the second half. So early on in the third quarter is when that happened. Not sure exactly the time.
The Williams touchdown was with 2:52 left in the third.
Yep.
So you got to assume that Love was already gone by then, right? And if the Lions are smart, and Ben Johnson is very smart, you go attack that free safety spot the minute Julian Love is gone.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what they did. And the communication was a challenge. But it's really hard to say much of anything about the defensive performance. I just think you didn't have the dogs. I mean, Drake Thomas, Kayvon Wallace, Kobe Bryant. It's a tough group. I mean,
Tyrese Knight,
nose tackle that they signed on the spot that day, and
Matt Gotel.
Yeah, no. Quentin.
Quentin Bohanna.
Yeah. Whoever he is.
He played 7 snaps. He played 7 snaps.
I mean, you just got dudes coming. I mean, he just got it from the street, though.
Out the woodworks. I mean, what about Tyrese Knight, though? We got to talk about him.
Tyrese Knight.
He's starting to get some national talk about being on the all-rookie team. He's been that good.
Really?
Yeah, they're starting to talk about him nationally a little bit. He played 39 snaps, 74% of the plays, and, was, as you said, was not the problem. And I think if you can call a 4th-round pick who's got to step in and start a solid piece or not the problem, he's not getting burnt, especially by a team with Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
That's a huge plus, a huge positive.
It looks like I missed on that one for sure. That I looked at that dude's college tape and said, "Dear God, he's on my Seahawks." That college tape was rough.
Right.
I mean, you showed flashes, right? But like it was just so undisciplined.
Right.
And
I will say, I want to add too that, Jonathan Hankins played 41 snaps, which was 77%.
Yeah.
That's a lot for a 320, 330-pound nose tackle that's supposed to, plug the run and play first and second down. That is a lot of snaps for a dude that big to play. Draymond Jones I don't believe has been playing 79% of the snaps leading into this game per game. He played 79.
Yep.
Jaron Reed played 75% of the snaps. I just think and the Lions, I would call probably the most physical, most formidable offensive line in football.
Yep.
And so to be that shorthanded and to have to play that many downs, that many snaps on the line, expected to hold up against the run, is asking a ton. And yet they still, let me see, I think they only gave up just about 4 yards a carry, if I'm not mistaken, which is phenomenal against this team. 4.1 yards a carry, 28 carries, 116 yards for Detroit. So to me, they held up, right? Again, the theme for me in this game is that this team played very well considering the circumstances, considering the injuries, and I'm proud of them. I'm proud of this team and how they played, and I think there's great things to come.
Yeah, you can't be mad at 3-1,
no.
Right? I mean, yes, going 4-0 would have been incredible, but I'm not sure how realistic that was. Really, when you're playing against a good team like that, there are some teams you can sort of eke out a victory against, but like you said, this Lions team could easily be in the Super Bowl this year, and that's no exaggeration. So I too liked what I saw, loved what I saw from a scheming perspective, and even still, the yards that the Lions got were on coverage bust.
Yep.
Somehow that's almost more encouraging to me than these guys, being able to just run wide open with like a corner is 10 yards off, playing this 10-yard bell technique that we're used to seeing, and they come in, and just giving easy. It wasn't that. The dudes are wide open, but they were wide open because of miscommunications, and this is a complex system, particularly for a lot of guys who have not played together. That's important. I just don't think that can be overlooked. But
and Coach MacDonald's going to clean that up, right? That he was brought in to make sure that this defense is airtight. And if it's communication problems, coverage busts, those are things he's not going to put up with, and things that I think part of what you're saying is we have confidence in he and his coaching staff to fix it. And it's not a talent problem. If it's a talent problem, then it's no fun. If your team is playing is scheme solid and doing the right thing, and they put 42 points up, and you're just not as good, that sucks. That's not fun to be a fan of that team. I've been fans of that team.
They were what they didn't have the talent last night. The talent was on the sideline. But
yes, but in terms of the second, what I'm saying is in terms specifically the secondary, right, but also in general, this is a very talented defense. We're not worried about do they have the talent. There was some coverage busts. There was some missed assignments. The coaching staff will clean that up, and provided we get some of those players back that are going through walkthroughs today. And Nwosu, they said, was doing the walkthrough. Leonard Williams, Boye Mafe, Byron Murphy was the only one, I think, in the front seven that wasn't. It looks like Cam Young is going to at least practice off the PUP list. So there's a lot of positives, in terms of this defense getting better. What I'm saying is, again, rooting for a team that doesn't have talent sucks.
It does.
Rooting for a team that has a ton of talent, a really good coaching staff from what we see, and just happen to be hurt is there. You can be positive or excited about that, right? There's improvement to be had. It's not a lost cause.
Absolutely.
And that's the phrase that I was looking for.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. That's a great point. And it just, I mean, you know, history is a circle sometimes. Apparently, the score that we always refer to this game in against the Miami Dolphins, where Baltimore Ravens have this, humongous bust, coverages everywhere. That Dolphins also scored 42 points on the Ravens that day. And so I saw that on social media, and yeah, I mean, it's like coincidence. 42,
Right.
42, it might be nothing, but it could also equally be a turning point for
Right.
this defense and this coaching staff. I think you want to learn these lessons now and not in week 11,
Right.
right? That's important.
It's also, I think with anything, you as a coach or as a manager or whatever it might be, you always want always want to give some feedback. You always want to have an opportunity to teach or to coach moving forward. And I think for Coach MacDonald, if they came out of this 4-0, you can nitpick a little bit, but those players aren't listening to you nitpick at 4-0. You're
Right.
3-1. And, offensively, there were some things that can get cleaned up. And defensively, obviously, you gave up 42 points. He can be tough on them, right? He can push them. And I think that's what he wants. I would almost rather they be 3-1 and focused than 4-0 and lose focus, because they could very easily just go to 4-1 and lose to the Giants at home if they go in cocky, right? So
Right.
there are a lot of things to build on. I need to ask you about your boy Anthony Bradford, though.
I
And
was just about to say, if you don't have anything on defense, I would like to now transition to talk about the
let's
offense.
go. Let's go. Let's go.
All right, since you asked about Anthony Bradford, first, we'll address him. Okay. One thing that I think was extremely significant in this game was that there was a genuine rotation between Christian Haynes and Anthony Bradford. And that was that Haynes got 36 snaps and Bradford got 54 snaps. Still more snaps, but that's the most snaps that they've given Haynes. And we asked the last episode that we talked, was it worth it to put Haynes out there in a primetime game against such a formidable opponent? And we both said that we kind of leaned on waiting, maybe playing him a little bit right, but not letting him start or anything. Let him, if that's going to happen, start against the Giants. It seemed like the team sort of agreed. I mean, he got more snaps, nothing crazy though, considering that the offense literally played 90 snaps in total. 36 is not a, humongous sample size, but it is sizable. And Haynes outperformed Bradford in every way. In fact, they scored on drives with Haynes in, and Bradford continues to just have the football IQ of a squirrel. In some moments, I just don't understand. This guy frustrates me so much. I'm about to be more frustrated than him than I am with Stone Forsythe in a minute. I might already be there. Who knows? I think I am already there. But Haynes, per PFF, if you are a new listener to the show, you will hear me refer to PFF numbers. I do understand that PFF is not everything. Sometimes I disagree with the grades, but I think it's just a universal scoring system when in a world where there's not a ton of statistical scoring and ways to measure from position to position. So I will refer to it, understanding that though that it's not a perfect system, and I think it's always worth a conversation. But I think this met the eye test. And that is that Haynes was given a 61 overall PFF grade to Bradford's 44. Sounds about right to me. Christian Haynes was given a 67 pass grade, and he actually had a better pass protection grade than run grade, which is 56. Excuse me. And that's sort of what Haynes is more known for his run game. In fact, in his fewer snaps, he did better in the run game than he did with the pass game. This team needs some pass protection though, so I'm not gonna be mad considering that he wasn't abysmal in the run game anyway. Like he didn't grade out that poorly. I'm good with that, man. Bradford, on the other hand, who I mind you, is supposed to be a mauler. On paper, he's the guy that can't give you pass protection, but can maul dudes in the run game. He grades out at a 30.8 in the run game. 66 pass protection. And I spoke on this the last episode. One of my biggest frustrations and why the number one reason why I feel you have to bench Bradford is because he can't seem to be consistently good at anything. He gives you highs and lows from week to really from snap to snap. Highs and lows. He's not consistent in the pass. He's not consistent in the run blocking. He can't seem to do any one thing even decently well. I mean, if you're supposed to be a run blocking dude who's getting third, I mean, and like I said, it matches the eye test. He got mauled. He just got destroyed on the snap. I mean, there's a goal line snap where K9 scores at the 1 yard line, but it has nothing to do with the offensive line because everyone gets blown up before basically as soon as the snap goes off.
That's the one where he bounced outside, right?
Yeah, everybody's going backwards, immediately blown up. It's to me that's embarrassing at that point. And yeah, I'll let you talk, man. But the Bradford situation, I'm done. Enough with the penalties. The most penalized guard in the NFL at this point, on top of not even being good at what you're supposed to be good at on paper, which the Seahawks could scheme around. To me, that's curtains.
Right.
That's just me.
I think I've said this before. If you're going to have poor play from the right guard spot, at least give it to the guy who you think is your future, who you spent a 3rd-round pick on, who you feel like has a higher ceiling. Allow him to learn in the trenches if there's going to be a hole there, right? And that's kind of where I'm at. I thought, okay, Bradford might get beat by some quicker D tackles in the passing game, but he could also open up some significant holes in the run game, and that's going to be okay, right? And to your point, he hasn't done either, and he's gotten a ton of penalties. And so give the opportunity to the kid and see what he can do with it. And I think what we've seen in the snaps that he's played is he is going to make mistakes, right? But there's a nastiness, like a feistiness to him, and a suddenness that's different. The athleticism with Christian Haynes looks different than the other guards on this team. And that's part of the reason why they picked him. I love him. I think he's going to be great. And I want to see him play now so that come week 14, 15, 16, 17 playoffs, he's got that experience and he knows what he's looking for. He knows what to expect. I do think, too, there's something to be said. You don't want him on Monday Night Football on the road in Detroit, giving up a bunch of sacks and getting beat all the time, right? And so you sprinkle him in and you get him comfortable. I don't know that we'll see him play that many more snaps against the Giants because Dexter Lawrence, there's an argument that he is the best interior player in the NFL. And I don't know if you want to expose him to that. Sounds funny, but you might want to wait for the Niners, the banged up Niners team to play him then instead more. But in my opinion, as the season wears on, I think we are going to see those snaps become more like 70-30 Haynes, 80-20 Haynes, which is a very, very good thing, provided Tomlinson stays healthy. Not that Tomlinson is any great shakes, but you're going to need to have a second guard out there, obviously. But it's very interesting to see.
He's better than Bradford, and that's hard for me to say because if you're a new listener, just know that I was against the Laken Tomlinson signing from the very beginning. If he was a starter,
against his light. I think you're selling short how you felt about the Laken Tomlinson signing.
You might be right. I feel very passionate about how poorly Laken Tomlinson has been playing, and I felt like I anticipated his poor play. But frankly, his floor is higher than Bradford's because at least that Laken is at least decent in the run game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's obviously very old. I would love to see more consistency from him as well. And he will be a problem at times, but I think you can pass with him most games.
And if he gets beat, it's most often going to be because he physically can't handle the guy he's going against. He's not going to make a ton of mental mistakes because he's been around the block. And there is, unfortunately, if that's the best case scenario, that's not great, but there's something to be said for, just not making a ton of mistakes. Whereas Bradford may get beat by quicker tackles, but also is making a ton of mental mistakes. And so, yeah, I think at this point, Tomlinson is in my opinion, the preferred guard over Bradford, which is sad to say because, I was with you. I don't think the Tomlinson signing was okay, but it wasn't any great shakes, right? You would have liked to have seen somebody a little higher quality than that, or not, as
I
long in the
didn't,
tooth as he is.
I didn't know the bar could get as low as it did. I didn't know.
Right?
I didn't know the bar could get so low, man.
Let me ask you this. So K9 looked phenomenal,
Absolutely.
and he was sudden. His cutting ability is just nasty. His vision and his ability to cut back is really second to none in the NFL at this point. There's some things he does that are very unique, and I love him. And I think the offense is so much more dynamic with him as the lead back. We saw Charbonnet play pretty decently a couple weeks ago. But what I want to ask you is, A, do you agree with that assessment? And B, the only thing I think of when I think of Charbonnet is that they spent a second round pick on him. And I wonder if in hindsight, the Seahawks would have done that I wonder if they thought he was more dynamic of a player. Because to me, he feels very solid. But I think if Walker continues to miss games at times, this offense is not the same offense without him in there. And I expected when they spent such a high draft pick on Charbonnet that Charbonnet would be able to step in without missing a beat. And I don't feel like that's what's going on with this offense.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm not huge on the second round pick thing. That's something that bothers a ton of people. Not me,
Mm-hmm.
really. I feel like running backs, you cannot get a running back in the first round. But I don't mind getting a guy in the second round, particularly because I think there's a lot to be said about your top rushers are drafted in the second round. I think you could talk about getting Billy Joe Blow if you like. Billy Joe Blow in the top five running back in yards. Like
Right.
if you go back and you look at the guys who are making difference making plays,
Mm-hmm.
they're drafted pretty high. I mean, so I don't have a problem with the running back theory. You want to be smart about it. I also
Mm-hmm.
thought that the logic was knowing K9's weaknesses, getting someone who fills that
Sure.
in. And so you kind of got them as a package deal.
Sure.
And so you saw that package deal last night, and I think they're learning how to use him too. You saw I think you saw Charbonnet play better, frankly, last year under Pete Carroll. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one way they were able to use him better because that team drafted, they had a vision for him and his role
Right.
when they drafted him. I think Ryan Grubb is still figuring out what works well for Charbonnet. I think
Mm-hmm.
they want them to be interchangeable, and they're just not. I think they're learning that. Charbonnet has proven to have some real value in the
Yeah.
receiving game, which I kind of like. I also think he's shown pretty well in pass protection, something that Kenneth Walker still struggles to do sometimes. And so I think that lightning thunder effect still worked really well, even last night, even the other night, when they played. So I'm fine with it. I wish he could carry the load better. I do, but I also think when it's just Charbonnet and again, I don't feel like they've utilized him properly, and they do him a disservice by not playing another back.
Right.
Like, it does him a true disservice for him to have to play and know he's going to play all of the snaps because I think, he hasn't said this directly, but kind of in between the lines, he sort of knows in the fourth they're going to need him the most.
Right.
I think he saves some of his juice and he treats it like a marathon, right? But he shouldn't have to do that because most running backs don't have to. You should be able to put in your third string running back to be a change of pace guy so the defense can't key in on this one dude.
Right.
That's not normal. So I don't strongly disagree with your perspective at all.
Mhm.
I don't personally feel that way. And I think for me, a lot of it's circumstantial. But, you know, again, I'm
Okay.
also not a person
So
who
I got two things. One is if Walker's out and Charbonnet's the lead back, you got to play McIntosh more, right? So that there's some diversity in play calling. There's some diversity because McIntosh is lightning fast in
right.
a similar sort of way. It's different than K9, but they're both very fast backs, and you need that diversity. You need that difference,
Yes.
and it might be that Charbonnet is 70-30 at that point, but it still needs to happen. My
Correct.
point about Charbonnet is that if you're going to spend a two on him, I don't think that Charbonnet is a bad addition to the team. I also don't think spending a 2 on a running back is necessarily a bad thing either. Derek, I go down the list of top rushers in the NFL so far. Derrick Henry was a second-round pick a long time ago. Jordan Mason was way down. I don't know what he was.
Yeah.
Barkley was number
But
2
he's in a
overall.
Shanahan system. That doesn't count.
Right? Kamara, I think, was the 3rd or 4th rounder. Taylor was a first rounder. Dobbins, Josh Jacobs was a 1. I think Aaron Jones was a 2, I believe. So you go down this list and you see a lot of 2s, right. And then you just see a lot of everything, right? And so if you identify a player as a talented player you want on your team, I get it. Jahmyr Gibbs was picked, I think, 12th overall by the Lions. That's a little rich for me, but if you think that guy's a difference maker, okay. What I'm getting at is, I don't know that in a vacuum, I don't know that Charbonnet is a second-round talent. That's kind of what I'm looking at, and I wonder if they could have either gotten somebody else or gotten somebody as talented as Charbonnet later on, and not spent that. Again, you spent the money already. It's not really that big of a deal at this point in time. I just don't see a lot of dynamic plays from him, and it's a role as that thunder in the lightning and thunder, whatever you want to call it. It's a role that, quite frankly, you're gonna hate me when I say this, but like George Holani could have played 90% of that role. You know what I'm saying? It's just
George Holani can't.
It's a role that you can find. A lot of different players can play that role of that big back that needs to come in and get tough yards and is going to be solid in the pass game in terms of protecting the quarterback. That's all I'm saying. And I'm not trying to be hypercritical of Charbonnet either.
Right. Well, now I'll say this, and I'll sort of end it here. When he was drafted, they didn't tell you Charbonnet is a dynamic running back. No one ever sold him as that. So I guess that's why I'm not disappointed.
But if you pick him at 2, aren't you saying you think he's a dynamic running back?
They never said that.
Spending that kind of pick on a running back though says it communicates what you think he's capable of. Otherwise, you would have waited to the 5th or the 6th round to pick a snowplow type of dude, that's going to carry the rock.
No, I think it speaks to what Pete Carroll values. I think it speaks to the regime.
Okay, yeah, I think it
speaks to the regime. I don't think it speaks to their evaluation of him as a player. They valued the Thunder and Lightning combo at a 2nd round cost.
Got it.
Even though I don't think they sold him as a 2nd round talent, they felt like it was important to have the tandem, and they were willing to pay a 2nd rounder to ensure they got it. And so that was always my understanding of how he was drafted. And so because of that, that's why I'm not disappointed. But I also get the argument of, I don't think he's a 2nd round talent. I would agree with you, given all the names you just listed. He's not that caliber of a dude, but no one ever said he was supposed to be. That was just something that was important to that regime.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. I give you a ton of credit for that. That is a great point. That is indeed why they picked him. It was about how they valued the position. I appreciate that point. But you can't tell me
and that's why Pete Carroll's out here.
Right. But like Gus Edwards, right? Gus Edwards is not a journeyman, but Gus Edwards isn't like a brand name. Yeah. And he ran the ball well for the Ravens in that power back role, and now he's with the Chargers. But you can't tell me you can't find a Gus Edwards somewhere other than round 2.
I would agree with you.
I'm not disagreeing. So that's just that's where I'm at with him is I want to see. I wish that there was more. And again, I'm picking nits right now because it's not a detriment to this team. It's just interesting to watch. It's interesting to look at when he against this Lions team, he gets 2 carries for 15 yards. I would expect against a team like the Lions, you might have wanted to try to give him more scratch. You want to give him a little more time. And he had two rushes.
Can I also add this? You need a line to block. Can I just put that out there? Charbonnet is the type of dude who needs a decent.
Yes, he needs a hole.
He needs a hole. Just one. He needs at least that. And so, to Charbonnet's defense, this O-line ain't creating diddly squat it is all either manufactured through Ryan Grubb, which I'm sure we can talk about here in a bit. I think a lot of what happened in that second half was they were manufactured touches and manufactured scheme to get K9 open, or it was K9 absolutely ad-libbing and just making something work. Because this team has yet to prove that they can, or this offensive line specifically, have yet to prove that they can run block even on an inconsistent level. Like there's just, it really hasn't been anything there.
But that's what the great coordinators, the great coaches, the great coordinators do that though, right? Yeah. They can manufacture big plays. You think Jordan Mason is the second most talented running back in the NFL? No, but he's got the second most yards because that running game is, and yes, there's Trent Williams. That line has some talented players. That has a Hall of Famer on it. But the reality is that running game is consistently great because they are manufacturing runs, right? Yeah. In the same way that I think, Ryan Grubb is able to manufacture throws for Metcalf and JSN now in a really different sort of way than we saw with Shane Waldron and previous coordinators. It's cool, right? It's cool. I was going to bring up Grubb too. I think the world of him. I did last year with UW, but you see he's creative. There's, the players seem to be very engaged with this offense. And the reality is you got, would I like to see them run the ball a little more? Yes, I think sometimes it's the matter of who they're going against in game situation. But 12 targets for DK, 9 targets for Lockett, 12 targets for JSN. Like he knows where his talent is, and he's making sure that those guys get fed the ball. And that's, smart managers, smart coaches put their people in positions to succeed. Absolutely. And you gotta feed your stars. The fact that Metcalf is getting the ball that often is, I've been clamoring for this, right? I've been wanting this for years because good things happen when you throw the ball his way.
Yep. No, 100% agree. Grubb really did show out. It was a great offensive minded battle, but it's kind of what you hope with Ben Johnson versus Ryan Grubb. But Ryan Grubb can scheme with the best of them, man, because the running game was not there. You saw them go from they tried to just go, up there. And I will say this, the Lions do have an incredibly good run defense. So the zero holes thing, I'm giving them a bunch of flack for it. They've been able to create a hole or two from game to game. Right. It's not been consistent, but they could create nothing against this Lions defense. Now, it's probably to some extent as a reflection of the Lions run defense, which has been consistent all year. But they ultimately ended up going from that condensed format because that's what ended up working. I want to say game 1 against the Broncos, they went into those condensed formats with K9, and that worked. That did not work with the Detroit Lions. So they adjusted, and then you saw them go a little bit more spread, and then you saw them get more creative and, like you said, manufacturing those touches. And that's when the run game really came alive. But since we are talking about blocking and run schemes, I want to come back to your guy, Stone Forsythe. I know he's not your guy.
Oh my God. No. But I do love calling people your guy when another person don't like him.
I know. I'm gonna say it was a rough day at the office for Stone Forsythe, no question. He gave up according to PFF, and I will say, how they count pressures allowed a little different for sure. PFF, I think, Pro Football Reference is a little stricter on what they consider to be a pressure, but they credit Stone Forsythe with 12 pressures given up. 12. 10 hurries, 1 sack, 1 hit. And I saw him get absolutely spun around like a turnstile against Aiden Hutchinson a couple of times, which I think were both the sack and the hit. But he also had 10 hurries. So, yeah, I mean, there's probably a game to shout out Stone Forsythe because he has had a couple of good games, I think, leading up to this one. And I will give him that is a formidable opponent. And Aiden Hutchinson is having a phenomenal year, leading the team in sack.
Hutchinson didn't have a sack, though.
He gave up a sack.
No, he didn't. To who? DJ Reader had one. Aleem McNeil had a half sack. Onwuzurike had a half a sack and Malcolm Rodriguez had a sack. So he
And
might have given up those 10 pressures, but who wasn't giving up pressures though, on besides Charles Cross?
Charles Cross was also credited with 10 pressures.
Yeah, he wasn't. I guess
Christian Haynes was given one pressure. Connor Williams was given one pressure. I think that was one that ended up resulting in a poor. I can't remember exactly, but I remember Connor Williams giving up a pressure specifically that resulted in a bad or negative play.
Right. I don't know. For me, if Aiden Hutchinson doesn't have a tackle or a sack, I get that the tackles didn't play well, but Hutchinson has been a game record, right? I think what he had 5 sacks in the previous game, something crazy like that. And it's, to me, that if I'm the Lions, I'm putting Hutchinson on Forsyth's site all day long, right? And I would have expected Hutchinson to put up more numbers. I get that it's not just numbers. I also get that, Gino was basically running for his life, chuck and duck sort of thing, 56 attempts, right? And they were pinning their ears back. But I do think it's an accomplishment that they only gave up three sacks. I get that it was probably 25 hurries or something like that, something nasty. But to me, your third string right tackle, well, I guess your second string since Abe Lucas is coming back in 2028, but your third string right tackle is, I think, held up okay if he didn't give up 3-4 sacks against what is a very formidable defense. That's what I'm getting at.
I think the no sacks is a result of Geno Magic and Ryan Crook. I don't credit Stone Forsythe for holding up when you gave up 12 pressures. Sorry. In fact, I think he had more pressures in one game than any single person all season. He had like 10 of, I want to say, the 15 pressures, or like it's something crazy. It's not 10 or 15, but it's something crazy. Like I do know he had 10 by himself. And that was a significant number of the Lions' pressures.
Right.
That came from that came from Aiden Hutchinson. And I bet you most of those were on Stone Forsythe. So I'm sorry. I will give Stone Forsythe credit in another game, not this one.
He's given up two sacks this year, 2 sacks, 1 penalty, and he's played 278 snaps.
That's what I said. Other games, last episode I gave him credit.
Well, he didn't give up no sacks, though.
Again, that has a lot to do with Geno and his ability to manipulate the pocket in a phenomenal way. But, again, he's been solid. He had a couple of solid games.
I can't. Hold on. I can't believe I'm the Stone Forsythe apologist, though.
You are, because, I'm happy to give him credit when he plays well, but I'm not going to give a dude who gave up 12 pressures credit. I'm sorry. They
gave up 3 sacks. They ran for 133 yards on 7 yards of carry. The Seahawks did. Like the line, I don't love this current iteration of this line, but that's not half bad compared to what previous Seahawks lines have been. And the Lions are nasty. The Lions have some incredibly underrated defensive players. DJ Reader is a pocket wrecker. Aleem McNeil is tough. Those are their 2 D tackles, along with the dude's name I can't pronounce, Onwuzurike. But those are some tough D tackles. That's part of why their run game defense is so good, right?
But they don't get sacks. They have like
those guys don't, but Hutchinson does. Hutchinson clearly does.
Hutchinson does, but he got like 4 of them against one team.
And he has 0 sacks against the Seahawks. That's my point. He has 0 sacks. And I'm a Michigan man. I love Hutchinson. Don't get me wrong.
Good on Geno.
I'm just saying I give the Hawks O-line credit for being able to run the ball a bit, for Geno to be able to complete 38 passes. And I know a lot of it was Geno, and he had a quick trigger. But Hutchinson burned whoever it was. Whatever phone booth he played yesterday, whatever, fire hydrant he played yesterday, light post, last week, that wasn't who Stone Forsythe was in this game, because he didn't give up all those sacks. I'll give it up now because I don't want to be like his number 1 fan.
Now, I'm a pressure person. I care more about pressure. I didn't like Darrell Taylor because he didn't provide consistent pressure. Your sack numbers to me only tells so much. I think sack
Yes,
numbers are a little fickle,
it
and
is a
I
part of the
value
story.
pressure more, and I
Mhm.
value holding up against pressure more. So it's probably just a philosophy thing. But I could care. I mean, I'm not gonna say I could care less because I can. I do. I will care. But I
Mhm.
just value how much pressure are you relenting. That matters a little bit more to me than the sack
We got to
numbers.
be realistic too. It's a third string right tackle against what is probably a top 5 defensive end in football.
And he played like it. He gave us 12 pressures.
He didn't have no tackles. He didn't have no sacks.
He actually did give up a hit, and he did give up a sack. He was credited for a hit and one sack.
Who got the sack against him?
I can't tell you that. I haven't
All right,
also
no, I
figured
gotta
it out
give
yet,
this up.
man.
I gotta give this up because I'm not. This is not my
I will
dude.
I will do my best to
I'm defending him
scout
like
film.
he's Charles Woodson right now. I can't be doing this.
I gotta find Gino's two sacks. Tell you who, who. No, he was sacked 3 times actually. Gino.
Yes, it was 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
All right,
don't get
moving on. Let's move on.
trying to scour the earth to find out. Can have peace of night about who it was. It
Oh
wasn't Aiden
man,
Hutchinson. That's obvious.
it's
It was
bad.
someone else. But I don't know how much that matters. Anyway.
Let's see.
Anyway,
Bad.
I mean, there's a ton to get into with this game. Really, we spent a ton of time talking about a lot of players, but we really haven't even talked about Gino, who I know we're going a little long here, but I've just got to give some credit for Gino, who played a magnificent game. The stats continue to not indicate his level of play. It's unfortunate that he's gotten tagged with some interceptions. And I will say some balls he's thrown has probably that should have gotten picked, particularly in those last 2 drives. He was just trying to play hero ball to get
Mhm.
them in the end. So I'm not really mad at it, but he did throw a few throws that should have been picked. But you know, I'm not sure he'll ever be a great touchdown interception guy, but he is excellent at accuracy overall, and I care a little bit more about that. And I love the aggression. The aggression is what kept them in this game and
Mhm.
prevented them from getting absolutely boat raced. And Gino has at several times put this team on his back when nothing else is going right.
Mhm.
Gino has shown up time and time again. He's answered the questions about can he win a game on his own. He's answered the questions about can he carry a team on his own. Now he does need a reasonable amount of time. He needs a reasonable amount of weapons. But I think Gino just continues to improve, even just a little step here, just him not, I feel like 2 years ago, there were times when a Gino would have completely ran out of the pocket and he just chose to sidestep, throw, right? Just little things like that that I feel like he's gotten so much more poised and polished and refined. And I feel like it's something you can only appreciate if you're watching the games or if you're just not completely unbiased against Gino. Right now, he is leading the league in passing yards and is second in completion rates. And there's still dudes that's like, Gino, yeah.
I will say I don't want to get too far into this rabbit hole, but Geno Smith was labeled as, there's stereotypes that people have, right? With
Right,
specifically with black quarterbacks, at least, previous generations.
right.
I remember when it was just Doug Williams and that was it. And Warren Moon, right? I'm
Yep.
old enough to remember those things. But with Geno, when he was coming out, if there was a while he was at West Virginia, is Geno Smith going to be the #1 pick overall? Like he had that kind of talent. And he had arm talent, but a lot of it was his athleticism, right? That's what we were sold on. And the thing that I love about Geno Smith, and the thing that I think we don't is not acknowledged enough, is it's his ability to process, his ability to understand defenses, his ability to know where to go with the ball, and then his heart rate, right? The calmness in the
Yeah.
pocket under pressure. And then he's accurate, but it's his brain really that what makes him great. And that was a stereotype of black quarterbacks in the past, right? It was
Yep.
why people didn't want them to play quarterback.
Yep.
And I love the fact that, quietly, he's such a cerebral quarterback for this team.
Yep.
And that's what everybody talks about. Everybody close to him just says his ability to understand what's going on out there is incredible. And that was not who he was labeled. In fact, he was labeled in an opposite way coming out of West Virginia when he was drafted. And so I love to see that personally. I'm just speaking for me right now. Like, I think it's really, really cool. And it's something that I wanted to say out loud because he's not, I think there are people in Seattle that really love him, but I don't even know that a lot of the Seahawks fans understand what it is that makes Geno Smith as good as he is. I've heard the Athletic Football podcast talk about, they love Geno Smith, right? They talk about Geno Smith like he's a top 8 quarterback in the NFL. And those guys are football nerds that are poring over film all day and all night. Yeah. And I trust a lot of what they say. But they say the same thing about Geno. It's like he makes the right decisions and he knows where to go with the ball. He understands coverages immediately. And I just wanted to call that out. You don't put up these types of numbers without understanding complex defenses and understanding where to go with the ball. And I think that we didn't see all of Geno under Shane Waldron because Shane Waldron isn't the same mind as Ryan Grubb is. Geno Smith is putting up Michael Penix at UW, sorts of not quite those numbers, but he's putting up these huge numbers that Penix was able to do too. And I think a lot of it obviously is, I'm crediting Geno Smith. It's also Ryan Grubb's offense. It's also, the way in which he's utilizing these weapons. But to not recognize Geno for being the intelligent, cerebral quarterback that he is, I think is to not give him the type of credit that he deserves. And this has been for years now with him.
Yeah, well said. Very well said. Completely agree with everything that you said. I think that's great points and just something that is not talked about enough about his game. So shout out to this team overall. I know they say there are no moral victories, but in my heart, it's a moral victory. So I'll take it. Anything else, Tino, you want to put out there? Tell people where they can find you.
With regards to the Hawks, I expect this game to be a win against the Giants. And especially if there's no Malik Neighbors, I think they mollywop the Giants, honestly, because Neighbors is the one weapon on that offense that scares you. And then it's the Niners on what is that? It's a Thursday night game, right? Against the Niners. And so I expect them to go into that Niners game 4-1. Excited about that. As far as where you can find me, as you spoke of, neither of us are we're on a new place now as far as where the podcast is at. Lots of Mariners stuff from me on Twitter at TINOJR20. And I will be pushing a lot of my fantasy baseball stuff, podcast and, top 100 minor league rankings, that sort of thing on my Patreon. This week in fantasy baseball, I'll start posting more links to that in the coming months. One other thing I'm working on, if any listener is interested, I know this is pretty niche, but every year I build out a pretty in-depth baseball statistical database with SQL. And so I can query literally every advanced metric stat that you could ever want. If people want access to it or want to talk about how that stuff is done, I'd love to chat with people about that as well. That's kind of what consumes a lot of my free time at this point. I know it's super nerdy, but for me, it's a lot of fun.
Awesome stuff. So be sure to follow the show at Seahawks 360 Pod. That's at Seahawks 360 Pod on X. That's where we're at right now. If you're listening, you are listening on YouTube. So thank you for listening to the end. Please like, subscribe, make sure you get the notification bell so you can get all updates that we do. We're hoping to get you some more content. So we want to make sure that you're tuned in for that. And then share with us. Let people know about the work we're doing. Let people know about the podcast. Let people know what we're switching over. We're going the independent route. Support the team, a couple people who love this team, who love everything that it represents and are working hard to bring you quality content. In the meantime, that's all the time we have for today. That's it. We're out. And as always,
go Hawks.